Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this ordinary meeting of Council at the 14th of July. Obviously, COVID provisions apply, and if I could say that the Council takes its COVID and public order obligations very seriously, and accordingly, quite a few staff aren't present. They're working from home, including our General Manager. So if I could just, first of all, welcome everybody to the meeting and acknowledgement of country. Wingecarribee Shire Council acknowledge the Gundungurra and Tharawal people as the traditional custodians of this land we now call Wingecarribee Shire. I pay my respect to elders, both past, present and emerging. I'd also like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders present here today. The Council prayer. Let us meet in this Council chamber in a spirit of fellowship and goodwill to represent all members of the community, its cultural and religious diversity, to be honest and objective in all our deliberations, to respect the view of residents, the rights of all to express their opinion without fear or favour, and to make decisions for the common good of the community. Thank you. Before I proceed with the meeting, I'd just like to say there's been a few inquiries in relation to me and the fact that I live at Manly. I haven't been commuting. Thankfully, I took a few days off at the assistance of my wife, and I was down at Sussex Inlet when all this blew up. So I haven't been home, and thankfully my wife's up here too. So we're enjoying the Southern Highlands at this horrible time. There are no apologies. Adoption of minutes of previous meetings. The ordinary meeting of Council held on 9 June. I'd move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on Wednesday, 9 June, the copies of which have been circulated, be adopted as a correct record of the proceedings of the meeting and declare that carried. The extraordinary meeting of Council held on the 23rd of June. I'd move that the minutes of the extraordinary meeting of Council held on 23 June, copies of which have been circulated, be adopted as a correct record of the proceedings of the meeting and declare that carried. For common sense ease, this council meeting won't be as formal as some of them have been in the introduction of items and the like. I'll be throwing to Ms. Rakamola quite regularly, but the General Manager will be introducing some items which she has prepared. Declarations of interest.
Thank you, Mr. Interim Administrator. We've received one declaration of interest from Mr. Michael Park in relation to item 11.1. The interest is non-pecuniary and non-significant in that the consultant who lodged the submission in relation to this item is a former work colleague of Mr. Park. Thanks.
Thanks for that. I have 1 minute, if I can find it amongst all my paperwork. Apologies. Oh, here it is. Sorry. As usual, there's no need to write like crazy. I've got copies. On Monday, I had the opportunity to join a number of local residents to voice objection of Wingecarribee Shire Council to the Hume Coal and Berrima Rail project. The submission made it very clear that I was putting the formal position of the formally elected body. On behalf of the council and its community, I appealed to the Commission to endorse the recommendations of the Department of Planning, Industry and Environment, to reject the application in view of its obvious impacts and to bring the marathon to an end for all parties. During the presentation, I was asked if Council's Local Strategic Planning Statement, LSPS, reflected the positions put forward in the submission. I can confirm that the LSPS does reflect this position, and a copy of our LSPS has now been forwarded to the Commission. There are clear statements on the position of coal mining, the protection of precincts, the protection of water and groundwater, and economic opportunities to the Shire. Under the terms of the General Manager's contract with Council, a performance agreement setting out agreed criteria has now been negotiated with Ms. Campbell, and for transparency and to assist with understanding of respective roles and responsibilities is formally tabled. In view of the suspension of the Council, elections, a comprehensive induction program, and the initial agreed performance criteria, the first review will be in July 2022. The contract provides for councillor involvement, and for the next 2 years, the review is to be facilitated by Ms. Kath Roach, and is also to include either Ms. Christine Hawkins or Ms. Kelly Hayes, who assisted me in the recruitment. When undertaking visits around the Shire, I had the pleasure of meeting the good folk who live on and around Wombeyan Caves Road at the Wallandilly Rural Fire Services Shed. We discussed a lot of matters, including Transport for New South Wales recurrent funding on the road and resident concerns about alleged leakage of funding. As a result, arrangements were made for Finch Consultants to undertake an audit of funds expended on the road for the past 3 years, and I now table a report which in short shows that all grants have been expended, plus additional monies from the Council's General Fund. What the report does not show, and which is not possible for me to further investigate, is if the community got value for its money or it was well spent. I'm in no doubt that the General Manager, as she reviews the culture and work practices of the organisation, will address this general concern of many residents. I previously expressed the opinion that to improve residents' interaction and transparency with Council, the Traffic Committee needs to be more open in its operations. A revised terms of reference was adopted at the Traffic Committee meeting on 24 June, the minutes of which are on this agenda. I must say I found the minutes of the meeting to be scant, and I could not readily see what matters were dealt with in closed session and why. I spent considerable time on the weekend searching Council's website for the agenda. Unfortunately, the agenda was not publicly available, and this has been rectified by the General Manager. I've now asked the General Manager if there's any good reason why meetings of the committee should not be webcast, and the matter is to be taken up with the appropriate state government minister. From talking to residents, there seems to be a number of reports which have either been commissioned by Council or its former executive that have never seen the public light of day. This course of action simply breeds suspicion, and I will continue to work to restore trust in the Council. Accordingly, I've asked the General Manager to review the following service delivery reviews with a view to making their release public: Children's Services, Waste Management, Community Wellbeing, Southern Regional Livestock Exchange and Aquatic Services. The Economic Development Roundtable was held on 23 June that was facilitated by Mr. Warwick Shanks, partner, KBMG, and I now table his report for the information of residents. Got a bit of tabling tonight. As a result of the roundtable, Mr. Shanks has made a number of substantive recommendations, which I understand were generally supported by those in attendance, and which will build on reports of the Small Business Commissioner and Ernst Consulting. Importantly, one of the recommendations is the development of an agreed long-term vision for the area, incorporating what the community will look like and how economic development will assist in achieving this vision. I've repeatedly said that council lacks strategic direction, and together with the General Manager's proposed new structure and the housing strategy, both on this agenda, the foundations have been laid for council to take back control of land use planning in the Shire. I've asked the General Manager, as a matter of urgency, to report to council on the outcomes of the roundtable and other planning matters to provide a pathway for strong community involvement. It is to be hoped that the days of planning on the run or at the whim of a councillor notice of motion are over. Finally, notice is given that there will be an extraordinary meeting of council held on 28 July. This will be the final meeting before the commencement of the caretaker period and will provide the opportunity for me to release a number of reports that I believe will take the council forward. My intention at this stage is only to have one meeting in August, and any matter listed will, of course, not only respect the council's statutory obligations to the caretaker period, but also the legal spirit of same. At this meeting, I will also release my final report to the Minister under Section 543N of the Local Government Act that will include recommendations that, in my view, will improve the proper and effective functioning of the council. I would move that the minute be received and noted, and the outlined actions in relation to the General Manager's Performance Agreement in July 2022 be endorsed. I declare that carried. We now move on to the matters listed on the agenda, and I'll introduce them for ease tonight rather than the General Manager. It's a bit difficult when she is remote. But the first item is 8.1, Councillor Induction Program. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. This report outlines Council's induction program following the elections scheduled for the 4th of September. The report sets out the initial program for the first 4 to 5 months, and that program is focused on governance framework, roles and responsibilities, legislative frameworks, strategic planning and policies, as well as relationship building, both between the elected council and the administration. It's proposed that this will be part of an ongoing program, and that the ongoing program will be developed in consultation with the elected council and will be based on the Local Government New South Wales Capability Framework for elected members. Thank you, Mr. May.
Thank you. Congratulations on this comprehensive induction program, and I am very confident it will be of great assistance to the incoming council, and those who think that having the mayoral election on Wednesday, the 22nd of September, is some distance from the election. I think it's a good move, because with the way the voting, I think, is going to happen, it's going to be quite a slow process. So having said that, I would move the recommendation outlined on page 2 of the business paper 1 and 2 and declare that carried. The next item, 8.2, organisation structure realignment. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. This report relates to the review and realignment of the existing organisational structure. And as requested, I'd like to provide a presentation to the council. Just going to share my screen and see how my technology skills go. Okay. So as outlined in the report basically sets out the realignment and review of the structure. And I'd like to talk through a bit of the background, the current situation, the current structure, the outcomes that are being sought as a result of this realignment, the proposed structure as provided for in this report, and a summary. By way of background, the previous permanent general manager completed their term in October 2020, and since this time there's been a succession of acting general managers. In September 20, a performance improvement order was issued by the Minister for Local Government. In March this year, the interim administrator was appointed, and since that time a number of reviews have been commissioned by the interim administrator or the previous acting general manager. These reviews have highlighted a need to improve governance and procurement practices, address workforce management matters, and also improve transparency, community communication and engagement. I was appointed on the 21st of June, just over 3 weeks ago, and we have the local government elections scheduled for the 4th of September. I'd like to just talk through some of the initial observations over the last few weeks, and these are based on conversations with people both internal and external to council. I've been meeting, albeit virtually, with community members and community organisations, as well as with as many of the team at the council as I can, and also reviewing the planning documents that have been prepared in the past, as well as the reviews that have been coming through. In terms of the current situation, some initial observations from a community perspective, concerns around public funds in terms of how money was spent and the question of value for money, concerns around roads, footpaths, traffic, parking, growth, and what that growth may or may not mean for the Southern Highlands. Reviewed the outcomes of the 2021 Community Satisfaction Survey, which was reported to Council earlier this year, and the feedback in terms of the level of performance of the the elected council in the past, and the feeling that the community have not felt heard by the council in the past. So some of the responses to this are around a focus on resetting the long-term vision and using the process to develop that vision to ensure it's owned by the community and the community are active participants in that. Response around reconnecting with the community and rebuilding trust, partnerships, and focusing on communication and engagement. Focus on the community in terms of projects and delivery. Improving communication and transparency and that access to information, and also improving the understanding of and participation in decision making and ensuring that our community do feel heard as part of that process. Some other observations from the council perspective, some observations around the need to focus on transparency in decision making and the provision of information, improving the clarity between roles and encouraging and supporting respectful relationships that are focused on outcomes, and a need to build capacity and capability in terms of understanding the Local Government Act, but the legislative framework, and how to be effective as a council, as an individual council, or as part of that decision-making body. So some of the responses to that are the preparation of these induction program as per item 8.1, a focus on strengthening the governance framework, undertaking a skills audit with the incoming council, and that is a requirement of the Office of Local Government in terms of ongoing councillor professional development, and using that skills audit to develop both a collective and an individual development plan. And as mentioned before, basing that on the LG New South Wales capability framework. Preparing a strategy to be forward thinking and acting in the best interests of the community, and providing for annual strategy days where the council, the councillors and the executive come together with a focus on strategy at that high level, but also on professional development. The third layer to this is from an organisational perspective. So some observations. We do not have a permanent executive. We have some very capable acting executive members, but as I said, no permanent executive. There is a lack of organisational direction and a high level of vacancies across the organisation, and that has an impact both on individual team members within the organisation and also our capacity to deliver to our community effectively. Concerns around the ability to attract and retain staff, and our people feeling fatigued or tired as a result of change. Some of the negativity over the last 12 months or so, the vacancies and or lack of direction. A feeling as an organisation that we're reactive. A recognition that we've undertaken significant IT work and there's a need for that commitment going forward to ensure that we continue that, and some concerns around inconsistencies around the application of policies. So in response to that, and part of that is the realignment and review of the structure, is to recruit the new executive to provide that stability and certainty to the organisation, and to provide an overall review of the structure with a focus on strategy and workforce. Our people are the most important or the most critical success factor as a service-based industry, and we need to ensure that our people are looked after and supported and that they're in the right jobs, doing the right things at the right time. We'll commence recruitment for essential roles to fill some of those vacancies and backfill where possible, whilst we undertake a full structure review, starting to initiate some internal work teams, and we've commenced preparation of an attraction and retention strategy and a change management program. The current structure is very narrow and deep. I don't expect anyone to be able to read the titles in there. It's more to illustrate the depth and how narrow the structure is. The functional groupings at the moment do not particularly appear to align and or potentially not logical. Strategy is diluted across the structure, and there are in areas lack of clarity around roles or functions, leading to some duplication, which leads then to inefficiency or perhaps wasted effort. A practice where some jobs have been created around people and or an issue rather than strategy and an outcome to be delivered. And just some inconsistencies in organisational design. Again, this is just a functional chart to show the current grouping and the functions that sit under the two current deputy GM structures. In terms of looking at the revised structure, the outcomes that are being focused on to achieve through the structural realignment is to provide that alignment with the functions to the community strategic plan, to achieve greater clarity, to have a focus on the future, both in terms of community planning or planning for our community, in terms of transport, economic, social housing, but also a focus on the future for our organisation and ensuring that we are geared up and structured and resourced to support the delivery of the community strategic plan. A clear focus on our people and culture, and also looking to build capacity and capability so we have an agile and community focused organisation. So with the proposed structure, the phase one is the executive structure, and that is to provide that stability and ability to move forward and to support the incoming council post-September. Phase two, which will be beneath the executive level, the management level, and then the detail areas and reporting lines will be implemented over the next 6 to 9 months once the directors have been appointed. In terms of where the structure fits, the focus of this report and this presentation is around the structure, how we organise ourselves, but we are also working on the alignment between our strategy as an organisation in terms of our vision and our outcomes, as well as the culture, how we do things, and then also the supporting systems and processes. In terms of the proposed structure or realignment, to move from the 2 deputy general manager roles to a 3 directorate structure, one focused around corporate strategy and resourcing, and that directorate is around how decisions are made and ensuring that the systems and resources are aligned to strategy, and the outcomes to be delivered by this directorate will be around ensuring the organisation's resourced, good governance and best value in procurement, legislative compliance, and also ensuring that the service and project delivery areas of the organisation are supported by the corporate systems. The second directorate around communities and place, and that's about the look and feel of our shire and working with the community. So delivering outcomes around building capacity and enabling our community, a focus on engagement, education, partnerships, awareness and compliance. The third directorate around service and project delivery. So very much about delivering, whether it be a project, a capital work, a works program, or direct service. And the outcomes to be delivered through that directorate are around meeting community needs and expectations, best value in delivery, and innovation and best practice. So using our services and our projects to demonstrate innovation and also delivery on some of the strategic directions of the council going forward. Within the executive structure and recognising the importance of focusing on strategy, creating 2 executive manager roles, one around strategic outcomes, and that area will be responsible to take a strategic view of planning for the future and also to deliver on some of the complex projects that require integration between particularly state agencies, state government departments, and internally with council, whether that be new release areas, business or innovation parks, and bringing together the functional areas of strategic land use planning, economic development, integrated transport planning, sustainability, social planning, and IP&R, integrated planning and reporting. And the final component of the executive will be an executive manager, people and culture, and that's about fostering a healthy and productive workplace and ensuring we have an engaged and skilled workforce and that we have a happy, positive and productive workplace. Whilst these are in boxes, moving forward and being a contemporary organisation, yes, you have boxes with functional reporting lines and accountability and responsibility, but we are one organisation serving a community or a community of many communities, and therefore there will need to be collaboration between those 3 areas. And some of the principles that we'll be applying as we move forward will be around being agile and flexible, applying a place lens to how we work, how we think, being community and customer focused, collaborative, team-based, moving from reactive to proactive, outcomes and solutions focused, using evidence as the basis for decision making, and acting with a sense of urgency. And all of this relates to the systems and processes that will support the structure as well as the cultural change program. So finally, the reason for bringing this forward at this time is to provide stability and support to the incoming council and the councillors as we move forward into their term, to provide commitment and stability for our staff, our people within the organisation through a permanent executive, and a decision-making body within the organisation so we can start to move forward and address some of the long-standing organisational issues. Thank you, Mr. May.
Thanks very much for that presentation. It's the intention, isn't it, to attach your presentation to the minutes so that residents can see that what you're planning. Look, you made mention, and in the first paragraph of your advices, you say the previous general manager left in late 2020. The council actually has been without a full-time permanent general manager, I think, since July 2020. I'll leave it to you to have a look at the circumstances surrounding the departure. I'll leave it to you. Sorry?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I can comment on that. The previous general manager, their official last day was in October 2020. However, I believe they were on leave from July.
Yeah, I'm well aware of that. You might, anyhow, Mr. McMahon brought that to my attention. People might be interested in the circumstances. I haven't had time to worry about it. Look, I find this, and I know I'm pretty sure I'll speak on behalf of the community. This is refreshing, and just get on with it. And I think the vast number of people in the area would agree with that sentiment. Can I move the recommendation outlined on page 17 of the business paper, items 1, 2, 3, and 4, but add a number 5. Council acknowledge that the report satisfies both its and the general manager's obligations under section 332 of the Local Government Act. I would declare that carried. I added number 5 just to make it abundantly clear to everybody, candidates, incoming councillors, staff and the community, that the council determines the structure and the general manager must consult with the council in relation to the appointment of senior staff. But after that, it's operational. And I think this report clearly indicates the groupings that will operate under the different divisions of the council. So now it's up to the general manager to get on with the job. Next item is 10.1, tender for Moss Vale Cemetery upgrade. I don't think there's anyone presenting this item. I've been told that item 4 should not be in the report, which I agree with because we're not accepting any tender. So I would move the officer's recommendation on page 11 of the business paper 1, 2 and 3 and declare that carried. Item 10.2, there's no one introducing this item either. Tender for Old South Road water main expansion. I would move the officer's recommendation on page 16 of the business paper 1, 2 and 3, excepting in 3, put Mayor / interim administrator. I don't know whether it's in a position to sign tenders. If I'm still here, I'm happy to sign it. If you have a mayor, the mayor can sign it. I would declare that carried. Item 10.3, acceptance of grant funding, fixing country roads program. I would move the officer's recommendation outlined on page 21 of the business paper, 1, 2, 3 and 4, and declare that carried. Next item 10.4, proposed road closure, part Old Argyle Road, Penrose. I would move the officer's recommendation on page 24 of the business paper, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and declare that carried. Next item 10.5, application to be appointed as a reserve trust manager, Crown Land at Berrima. I would move the officer's recommendation outlined on page 28 of the business paper and declare that carried. Item 10.6, Balmoral Reserve, community update. I understand that this matter is being introduced by council staff. Ms. Fort.
Thank you, Mr. May. Balmoral Reserve is located on the corner of Wilson Drive and Hall Road in Balmoral and is the subject of community requests to redevelop the site for use as a community park. The land was acquired by council in 1989 as an outcome of subdivision of private land. It was classified as community land and zoned RE1 public recreation. Since acquisition, council has managed Balmoral Reserve as a bushland reserve. In 2013, there was a proposal to redevelop the site into a sports oval and a rural fire service neighborhood safer place. To this end, council resolved to allocate $100,000 toward the project. During project investigations, numerous issues came to light, namely presence of threatened flora on site, objections from the New South Wales Rural Fire Service to the proposed neighborhood safer place, and that no plan of management existed for the site. More recently, during the devastating bushfires of 2019-20, Balmoral Reserve was heavily impacted with significant loss of vegetation and the perimeter fence destroyed. At this time, council received feedback from Balmoral residents that the establishment of a community park at Balmoral Reserve was a desirable community resilience project. Council allocated a further $100,000 from disaster recovery funding arrangements for this purpose, which has prompted reinvestigation of the potential for redevelopment of the site. It remains that no plan of management exists for Balmoral Reserve, and in accordance with the Local Government Act, a plan of management must be developed by council in consultation with the community, and the land must be categorized appropriately. Redevelopment of the site cannot be considered until the plan of management is in place, and redevelopment must be consistent with the categorization of the land. The Bushland Reserve's generic plan of management is currently in development and will include a number of council-owned and managed reserves across the Shire, including Balmoral Reserve. Preliminary works to prepare the plan have already commenced, and community engagement activities will occur in the coming months. It also remains that 2 species of threatened flora are on site, being Persunia glaucensens, commonly known as the Mittagong jibung, and Persunia hirsute, or hairy jibung. Both are listed as endangered under the New South Wales Biodiversity Conservation Act, and as a result, there are additional legal obligations on council to obtain other approvals, licenses, or permits for any proposed works or activities. In summary, the key issues to be resolved is whether a community park is appropriate at this location, considering it is habitat for threatened flora, or whether it is possible for council to take a balanced approach and reduce the impact on habitat by minimizing the size and scope of the proposed community park. It is recommended these questions be answered over several steps as outlined in item 2 of the recommendation. Thank you, Mr. May.
Thanks. I have a question. I know this site well. I've walked it several times now. And I understand the frustration of residents, not only in Balmoral, but in other areas where council's dragging the chain, in effect, in creating plans of management for its own parklands and Crown lands, which has been a statutory obligation for some time. But that's being caught up. But I would hate to think that the plan of management for council-owned land, it's one document for council-owned and Crown land. Council can address the questions much quicker than the Crown land. Now, as I understand it, the council owns Balmoral Reserve. And I would hate to think you had to wait 6 or 9 or 12 months while you get it through the Lands Department. Is there a way that we can, I don't know who the question would go, you happy? Is there a way to break the plan of management up? Not now, but at the end, let the consultants know that the idea will be to break it up to council and Crown so the council can get on with its side of it while we wait the Crown. Can you give some thought?
Yeah, that's certainly something that could be considered. It hadn't originally been envisaged to be done in that way, but it's something that could be considered.
Yeah, it's just an idea, fresh eyes. And, you know, and I just think it's a bit unfair that people of Balmoral have been through enough. I don't know whether, well, I know that not everyone in Balmoral is going to be happy with the outcome. That's just the way the cookie crumbles in some communities. But I just seem to think that if it's held up by virtue of the Lands Department, well, they might be very quick, but it's just something to keep in mind. In relation to item 10.6 Balmoral Reserve, I would move the officer's recommendation 1, 2, and A, B, C, D, and E as outlined on page 33 of the business paper and declare that carried. Before you go, if I just publicly say, could you pass on to your team and to the group manager Capital Works? I've had 3 emails, 2 messages, and someone stopped me in Coles thanking me for what has been achieved at the Balmoral Memorial Hall. I'm always happy to take the credit, but I'll let people know it wasn't me, it was the staff who came to me. And I think everybody is pretty happy with the outcome down there now, so which is good news. Thanks.
Thank you.
10.7, the investment report. I would move the officer's recommendation outlined on page 41 of the business paper and declare that carried. We next move on to 11.1, and it's really a bit of a package. 11.2, I think they're being dealt with separately. Next to the appointment of a general manager, I think this is probably the most important thing that I'll do while I'm here. And this is certainly returning to the people the power of land use planning and getting it away from developers and the state. Mr. Park.
Thank you, Mr. May. Look, you'll have to take my word for it that I'm smiling underneath this mask, but I am, I guess, really happy to present to you the reports on the local housing strategy and the local strategic planning statement, as it hopefully resolves what's been a long-standing planning issue for the Shire. So these strategies are critical platforms for the future of our Shire and aim to provide certainty to the community and to the industry as well as council for where development will be located in the future. So, Mr. May, the local housing strategy and the local strategic planning statement provide a 20-year land use vision for the future of our Shire and a long-term planning framework to meet the housing, economic, social and environmental needs of the community. So the strategies take into account the regional planning framework, as well as our local and regional context to ensure that growth is managed in a way that's in keeping with the community's expectations and values. So the local housing strategy in particular was developed through a methodical, objective and evidence-based process to determine how and where our Shire is going to grow. And it aims to provide greater certainty to the community, the industry and council in the location of future development areas, which will facilitate informed investment decisions and build confidence in the decision-making process of council. And very much as you mentioned, these strategies aim to ensure that council and the community determine how and where our Shire will grow, and that those decisions aren't made by the development industry and or the state government. So by way of very quick background, the strategies were adopted in June of last year after extensive consultation with the community. However, in August of last year, the council considered a notice of motion and ultimately resolved to amend the strategies to take out one of the new living areas and add in 2 sites that were nominated by landowners during the exhibition period. Me and my team went out and consulted the community on those amendments. Prior to reporting the matter back to council, another notice of motion was considered by council in December of last year, and the council ultimately resolved to amend the strategies again. So in February and March of this year, my team were back out in the community consulting with the community. So during these 2 most recent exhibition periods, I think we received, from memory, 76 submissions, including 16 submissions made on behalf of landowners seeking to have their land included in the strategy. So the outcomes of the exhibition are ultimately addressed in 2 reports before you today. So the first report addresses the 16 sites that were nominated by or on behalf of landowners to have their land included in the strategy as a future living area. And the second report provides an overview of the feedback received during the exhibition on the strategies as exhibited. So, Mr. May, following the feedback received during the exhibition, the staff have ultimately recommended that the amendments to the strategy not be adopted, as the changes lack strategic merit and justification and were not underpinned by the objective analysis that informed the strategies. So, the matter has been considered at the extraordinary local planning panel meeting of the 1st of July. And prior to the meeting, all panel members were given a detailed briefing by staff. So the briefing provided an overview of the strategies and the methodology used to develop those strategies. And it covered things like the amendments to the strategies and the feedback received during the 2 most recent exhibition periods. And Mr. Mayor, I don't have a copy of that presentation to table at the meeting, but I'm certainly happy to make it available as part of the minutes to this meeting. So all submission makers were invited to present to the local planning panel, and I believe 17 people took the opportunity to address the panel to either support their submission or challenge the staff's report or recommendations. So I guess, as I mentioned earlier, the matter was considered at the planning panel and on the 1st of July, and the panel ultimately supported the staff's recommendations. And I'll just note that the panel also provided advice to council that the Colavale South site number 1, which is shown on page 66 of the draft housing strategy, could be considered as a future infill development opportunity in Colavale. And that advice is ultimately reflected in part 3 of the recommendation in the second report before you today. And Mr. May, as you would be aware, council have received an additional 3 submissions made by landowners or on their behalf following the panel meeting. So firstly, the landowner and the consultant acting on behalf of 181 Drapers Road, as well as the consultant acting on behalf of the landowner group at the Wattle Street site in Colavale. So I guess just to finish up, the report ultimately recommends that we do not adopt the changes that were exhibited over the last 6 months, and that we stick with the strategy that was ultimately adopted by council in June of last year. And just very quickly before I finish, and if it's okay with you, Mr. Mayor, I just want to acknowledge the hard work that's been undertaken by council staff and the community in delivering these strategies. There has been a lot of long nights and long days in developing these strategies, and I'm really proud of particularly my team, but the whole of council and of the community input into developing what are 2 critically important strategies for the future of our Shire. So thank you.
If you can stay there. The extra submissions that have come in, the one from Cardno, Mr. McMahon, when he was acting general manager, raised concerns with me about the amount of temporary staff that Cardno provides to the, I don't know who the question, you? Sorry. The number of, Cardno's a staff hire company as well, as I understand it. And Mr. McMahon indicated to me that the council had in effect spent millions with this organisation over the last few years, and he questioned why. And Mr. Ryan in his report doesn't mention Cardno, but questions why the council would be using contractors at a time when, in Mr. Ryan's view, the council was not paying its development services staff in particular at market rates, and there was a very high turnover. And I'm summarising what he said to me, and that he thought it would be better if the premium for the contractor went to the employee, and we recognised as a council the employees' knowledge of the community, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I did ask him to do some extra work on that, but I must say I forgot until I got this letter yesterday from Cardno, and Cardno are now, in effect, lobbying for a landowner when they're providing a workforce to us. Now, I don't know whether that's a conflict, that's a matter for Cardno, but I know there's a perception in the community that they're not happy. Are you and the General Manager looking into this? Has the message been passed on by Les?
Thank you, Mr. Interim Administrator. Certainly, council is a user of services for numerous labour hire companies, particularly in the development assessment area, and it is something that myself and the General Manager are actively reviewing at this time.
Good. Look, I don't cast aspersions on Cardno. I'm not saying it's a conflict, but there's a perception, to me at any rate, that this is not the way to run a council. And it's just probably flagged as another change that will be made before September. In relation to the matter generally, I've spent an enormous amount of time on this, as you know. I've inspected every site, some twice, and I really respect the work of the council staff. It is very professional, and Ms. Walsh, the chairman of the panel, contacted me also to say that the panel was very impressed by the quality of the work that went into this. Look, the housing strategy provides a long-term planning framework for housing in the Shire. Doesn't matter who you talk to, there's a concern about housing in the Shire, the number of people in the Shire, where they're going, affordable housing. The area is becoming unaffordable for a lot of people. You go to Robinson and they say that there aren't enough people for a supermarket IGA type scenario, that there is plenty of infill there, but there's opportunities for greenfield. It's just a general concern in the community where this housing's going, and that the community had lost control. Now, the development to the south of Moss Vale,
Look, known as Chelsea Gardens.
Chelsea Gardens, that's been approved, but there's a lot of myth about that too. That people think that the roads aren't going to be upgraded and the infrastructure is not going to be improved. Whilst it has been approved by the state, in effect, there will be road improvements as it develops, and even apparently a new connection back to the Illawarra Highway. And there's a lot of myth, and fiction becomes fact. Now, what is proposed here, I hope, addresses a lot of this, because this is not something that's going to happen tomorrow. It's going to allow the council to think strategically about how you develop a lot of these new land releases. But at the same time, there's opportunities in this community, in this shire, for infill development that are being slowed down or stopped to a degree by the council's own policies. So whilst they're saying, there's opportunities, those opportunities are thwarted by policies. And at the same time, you have particularly, I've seen it in Exeter and Bundanoon, old subdivisions, which, the council gets blamed for, but it's no fault of theirs. They're just historical subdivisions which are being acted on because now the economic reality is the land is worth more and developers are developing it. So look, there's a lot of issues, there's a lot of problems with a housing strategy, but in my view, what is proposed gives certainty to the community of where it's going to go. Look, I'm parachuted in and I'll be parachuting out in September, but if I could just really say to the incoming council that this is a good document, and I would hate to think that at the whim of the last person a councillor spoke to or a notice of motion, it's played around with again, because I'm afraid, in my view, it was, for want of a word, bastardised from the original proposal the staff put up. Having said that, I don't totally agree with it, but that's not really my role to interfere, but I've got a couple of suggestions that I would like to put back to the panel and to the staff to have another look at. So in relation to 11.11, I would move, and you've got this, I gave it to you? Oh. Okay. I would move that, okay, number one, landowner nominated sites 1-16. No, you're going to have to type it out again, sorry. This is going to take time, but we've got to get it right. No. Leave that as it is and start again. That's the recommendation from the panel. This will be the resolution of the council. No. I don't want you to play with the recommendation from the panel. Okay, I would move that. I'm going to be confused now. What's the 5? That's just the way the system works. Yeah, sorry. Okay, that one, landowner nominated sites 1-16 not be included in the final local housing strategy as new living areas, comma, however, new line A, landowner sites 8-9, Howard's Way, Mittagong, be referred back to the local planning panel for consideration as a future infill development opportunity for Mittagong. And B, landowner site 9 Bong Bong Road, Mary Street, and Old South Road, Mittagong, not be retained as an investigation area in the local housing strategy, and council work with the landowners to undertake a detailed assessment of infrastructure requirements and explore opportunities to deliver infrastructure upgrades that provide a broader public benefit to the Mittagong community. I'll ask Mr. Park just to go across and help. I just want to make sure this is right. So you can see there what I've done. If you can just make sure that's reflected in the resolution coming up, if I could just say, I'll give you the reasons why I'm suggesting this. In relation to the Howard's Way one, I've been advised by council staff that this was actually in the original proposals of the staff and was taken out a few days before at the whim of the executive staff. And it's just not good enough. I've been to this site a couple of times. I now know it quite well. It's on the other side of the road from is it Welby Garden Centre? Yeah, the Welby Garden Centre. And halfway up the site, you'll see there's the house on the site. And what was proposed is nothing above that house. That house above that becomes, in effect, community land. Underneath it is an opportunity for more housing. And it's, close to everything. Well, it was taken out. And I think it needs to, I'm not saying put it back in. I'm just saying to the panel, can you please have a look at that? Apparently there was a concern that when you drive past Big W and all that, you look onto the hill, you'll see all this housing. Well, you'll see a lot of concrete in Big W too. But when you look into the hill, you'll see the hill because it'll still be there. The housing is underneath. So that's why I'm asking to have another look at that one. The other site is to the south of Renwick and on the western side of our Old South Road. And I really think the panel should have another look at that site, and so should the staff, because I don't know how many people I have spoken to have made complaints about Old South Road and the intersections along Old South Road, more particularly down closer to what they call East Bowral, when you turn right onto Bowral Road, I think it's called. That's a horrible intersection. I just think that there could be a public benefit if something could be. The council obviously hasn't got the money to invest millions and millions into our Old South Road, but if something could be worked up that allowed substantial contributions for a public benefit as well as the benefit on that site, it could be worthwhile. And that's why I'm just suggesting that the panel and the staff have a further look at those two sites. In particular, and as I say, the Renwick site, to me, it makes sense because it builds onto Renwick, and I'm not saying do it. I'm just saying have another look. How are we going? That's what I've got. So does everyone understand where I'm up to? And if I just emphasize, this is not going to happen tomorrow. This is a 20, 30 year scenario, but at least people will know and the council staff can plan in consultation with the community for infrastructure, proper infrastructure, not catch-up infrastructure. Okay, I move as on the screen there, one, A and B, and declare that carried. The next one I've been at Robertson a few times, and I don't believe that the view of the former council in relation to Robinson reflects the view of Robinson residents. I've listened. I'm not a town planner, but I think I've got common sense, and I take professional advice. So in relation to item 11.2, can you copy the panel recommendation and then we can make some changes, if you don't mind? Oh, you've done it already. You heard me. Okay. Well, I would move 1 as is, 2 as is, but adding the following words: exhibition of the housing strategy, comma, and be considered as future infill development opportunity if stroke when the new living area is rezoned for residential development. 3 as is, a new number 4 to address what I was talking about in the last issue, for land at 9 Howards Way, Mittagong, be referred back to the local planning panel for consideration as a future infill development opportunity for Mittagong. New 5, council work with landowners of the Mittagong bracket east close bracket investigation area to undertake a detailed assessment of offside traffic impacts and investigate infrastructure upgrades to support future development within the investigation area and for the greater public benefit to the Mittagong community. The old 4 becomes 6. The old 5 becomes 7. And the old 6 becomes 8. Hang on, what's gone wrong? Okay, just bear with us. This is complex, and if I could just say, Robinson, when you go out to Robinson and you go to this new area, and it's kind of to the north of Robinson, Robinson is dissected by a creek. And if you live north of the creek and say you want to go Kangaloo Road or somewhere like that, you've got to get back onto the highway. You can't get across the creek. The opportunities that this will present, and which the former council obviously weren't overly interested in, it's their safety as well. And I think you'll find, or we know, that the residents of Robinson who live in the northeast section will have greater accessibility in their own community by virtue of this. So, there's methods in the madness to everything we're doing. And I really thank the staff for assisting me with this. They've spent a lot of time on this, as I have. But I reckon we've got it right. Okay, I would move the recommendation on the screen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and declare that carried. And once again, congratulations to you and your staff, Michael, on a job well done. Item 11.3, planning proposal to amend the Wingecarribee Local Environmental Plan with regard to council-owned public reserve at Redford Park, Barrel, and Anembo Street, Moss Vale. I would move the recommendation outlined on page 115 of the business paper 1 and 2 and declare that carried. Item 11.4, planning proposal to amend the Wingecarribee Local Environmental Plan 2010 to update flood planning area maps. I would move the recommendation outlined on page 124 and 125, 1, 2, A through to L, and declare that carried. The matters I'm going through quickly here have been endorsed by the panel, by the way. 11.5, planning proposal to amend the Wingecarribee plan for the western portion of Redford Park, Barrel Residential Estate. I would move the recommendation on pages 129 and 130 of the business paper, renumbering them 1, 2, and 3. And declare that carried. 11.6, a subdivision review of determination for 1 Sir James Fairfax Circuit, Barrel. I must say I found this one very complex to read, but with thanks to the staff, I can now understand it. I would move the recommendation outlined on page 135 and declare that carried. The next item, 11.7, response to governance, human resources and statutory reporting independent review. I would move the recommendation outlined on page 147 of the business paper, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and declare that carried. 10.8, draft councillor and staff interaction policy. Obviously, this is going to have to be reviewed when the new structure comes into place, and perhaps the new structure will be better known when it comes back to council early in the term of the new council. On page 161 of the business paper, I would move recommendations 1 and 2, declare that carried. Um, 11.9, draft social media policy for public exhibition. I would move the recommendation on page 177 of the business paper and add a number 2, that the general manager include the draft policy in the staff training package referenced in item 8.1 of the agenda. And I'll declare that carried. It's not all one-way traffic, what happens at a council. The staff also have responsibilities, and I just want to make sure that they are reminded of them. 11.10, the Windsor Caribbean Community Assistance Scheme 2021 to 2022. I would move the recommendation outlined on page 187 of the business paper 1, 2 and 3. Declare that carried. Uh, 11.1, revised media policy for public exhibition. I'm happy to put this on public exhibition, but I do think that there should be an opportunity in the policy for the general manager to nominate a particular person to speak on behalf of the council for certain issues, a senior person, obviously. Sometimes there's sources for courses, and a staff member may know a lot more detail for a press briefing than a general manager or a mayor, but that's a matter for the general manager. In relation to 11.11, I would move the recommendation outlined on page 203 of the business paper and declare that carried. 11.12, the support for, and I don't know how to pronounce it, Tour de France in November 2011. This was quite an issue when I was out at Robinson, and I wouldn't say it divided the community, but I think there was a misunderstanding. The roads aren't closed for the day. The roads are just closed when the bikes come through. And, you know, we're all in this together, whether it's Kiama or Shoalhaven or Windsor Caribbean. And I think if they can get the traffic systems right, there's a benefit, not only to the Shire, but to Robinson as well. I would move the recommendation outlined on page 212 and declare that carried. The minutes of the traffic committee meeting held on Thursday, 24 June. And to say I'm not happy with this is an understatement. I've dealt with this in the by minute, but I've said enough about it. In relation to item 12.1, I'd move the recommendation outlined on page 215 and declare that carried. General Manager, I think that concludes the business.
I believe so, Mr. May.
Thank everyone for their attendance and declare the meeting closed.